Om Jananing Sharadang Deving Ramakrishnang Jagat Gurum Padapadmitayo Sritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. So we have gathered together in this hall to listen to a remarkable speaker, administrator, brilliant scholar, and a very good literature, receiving so many awards, who is publishing very regularly her articles in the daily newspapers. She is Srimati Anita Agnihotri, IAS retired. Today, this evening, she will be speaking on Women and Public Administration at second Sonali Chakraborty Memorial Lecture. As is the usual tradition, I am going to read out a brief note on Sonali Chakraborty. Sonali Chakraborty was born in Kolkata. She was the only child of Sri Arun Chakraborty, who worked in the Department of Land and Land Reforms, Government of West Bengal, and Dipti Chakraborty, a housewife. Sonali started her education in Ramrampur Junior Basic School, Diamond Harbour, in remote South 24 Parganas. She made her school proud by securing a rank in the primary scholarship examinations. Sonali graduated with honors in English from Women's Christian College, Kolkata in 1987-90. She later completed her master's in English from Calcutta University in 1992. She took her first attempt in a competitive examination, the WBCS, and qualified in the Group A cadre in 1992. She rose to hold the office of the Additional Exercise Commissioner, serving the government for 25 years. Cut short by the only eventuality of humankind. Being the youngest of the batch of 92 at 23, he was one of the very few female officers in her ranks. She always took immense pride in the integrity and righteousness of effectuating her duties while being draped in a sari every single day. Apart from her compassion towards associates and people around her, she is still remembered by her colleagues for her remarkable emphasis on very high moral standards and humanity above everything, even at the cost of personal sacrifices at times, all with an indelible smile on her face, commemorating the path that she adopted in life. The foundation Sonali Chakraborty Foundation, decided to start its journey down the same road. An infrastructure has been set up at our primary school for disseminating computer literacy among the students. The foundation has a collaboration with Fakir Chand College, Diamond Harbour, to support the initiative as an outreach program of the college. Students of Computer Science Department are imparting training on a daily basis. The training will be extended to local underprivileged women in the near future. Again, the foundation, in collaboration with Women's Christian College, has started a civil service study center which will provide assistance to aspiring candidates for different competitive examinations for public service, especially to those who are not privileged enough to afford it. Direct training, study materials, regular assessment, and mock tests will be the part of this program. Senior WBCS officials have been kind enough to voluntarily participate and help in this endeavor. There are future plans of replicating the above activities to other institutions as well to serve the underprivileged. The Foundation is organizing an annual lecture series on public administration in the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture to usher in a new thought process for those who, in the service of the public, which Sonali imbibed to the best of her effort in a dignified manner. We are happy that persons from the colleges who are helping the foundation and Sonali's friends and well-wishers are present here. Sonali Chakraborty was an ordinary woman and came from a very modest background. Her parents decided to stay in the tin roof home even after their daughter could provide them more comfort. Sonali had some extraordinary qualities which any human being can possess, irrespective of the economic background. The Foundation strives to give confidence to those ordinary women. It's a matter of privilege that we are able to organize this lecture in an institution which has the blessings of the apostle of ordinary yet most extraordinary woman, Ma Saroda. This Sonali Chakraborty Memorial Lecture, instituted by Sri Nachiketa Chattopadhyay on behalf of Sonali Chakraborty Foundation. Today, Srimati Anita Agnihotri, retired IAS, will deliver Sonali Chakraborty Memorial Lecture, subject being Women and Administration. This is all about her life, as we have received from her husband, Professor Nachiketa Chakraborty, ISI, Kolkata. And I have spelled out a little bit on Sonali Chakraborty Foundation also, though I noticed here that introduction of the foundation and also introduction of the speaker would be done by Sri Maniklal Moitro, Additional Director, NSATI. Now, the publication of the book, or booklet I should say, lecture delivered by Swami Atmapriyananda last year, by me, Do you want to make any announcement regarding this book? Please do come. Comment on the publication by Professor Anita Chakraborty.
Well, Maharaj just forced me to stay here and say something. This is a project which is very close to my heart. So I think I won't be able to speak a lot of things about this. But about this lecture, I have already heard Swami Atmapriyananda ji. Swami Atmapriyananda ji. Actually, I worked with him for a lot of years in Ramakrishna Mission Vidya Mandira, and so he was kind enough to deliver when she heard about, he knew Shonali as well, and he said that, okay, I will deliver the first lecture. And at that time, I thought that this could be a new discourse in public administration, and therefore we decided that just at the end of the lecture, that's not the end of all, and then we'll try to get it published in a monograph along with a translation. So that is, it is here. Maybe there are some mistakes, as in every book. We have tried our level best to make those things, minimizing those errors. But please, we are distributing this to the audience so that they can actually go through that and take the message that Maharaj delivered as the first Shonali Chakraborty Memorial Lecture. Thank you.
Now I would request to see Maniglal Moitro, Additional Director, NSATI, to introduce the Shonali Chakraborty Foundation and also the speaker.
Namaskar. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and Swami Suparnananda ji Maharaj, Srimati Anita Agnihotri, who we see as our teacher. We know that already it is announced that we are gathered here today to celebrate the memory of Shonali Chakraborty, a model government officer, an incredible colleague, and most importantly, a good human being. And this lecture is a part of our initiative to organize annual public speech on public administration by eminent personalities in collaboration with the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture, Goldberg. And personally, and on behalf of our organization, Shonali Chakraborty Foundation, we are honored and privileged to have Srimati Anita Agnihotri among us to deliver the second Shonali Chakraborty Memorial Lecture. Born in 1956, Kolkata, a retired IAS officer, and widely loved and respected as an author and poet, Srimati Anita Agnihotri is our venerable speaker for the day. She was the topper in higher secondary examination, then graduated with bachelor's as well as master's in economics. Ma'am joined as an IS officer in Odisha cadre in 1980 and was the collector of the Sundargarh district, in which she did tremendous job, and later held various important portfolios like Principal Secretary in Textiles and Industries Department under Government of Odisha. In 1991, she took a sabbatical and earned a master's in Development Economics under the University of East Anglia, Norwich, UK. Ma'am was the joint DG in Director General of Foreign Trade, DGFT, since 1996 till 2001, and consequently became the Development Commissioner of SEEPZ, Mumbai, in 2008, as well as being a member of Secretary of the National Commission for Women. Ma'am retired in 2016 as the Secretary in the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment of Government of India. Having spent a considerable amount of time working with the underprivileged tribal women of Odisha, Madam has extensive knowledge of, and as such, has written about exploitation and deprivation in the lives and environment of the downtrodden. In 1991, she wrote the novella Mohuldia Days, chronicling the incidents that she had encountered as an administrator in Odisha's Mohuldia. In 2015, her acclaimed book, Mahanodi, was published, which recounted the story of the Mahanodi in the first person as the river flows through underdeveloped regions of Chhattisgarh and Odisha, while discussing the profound influence of the river on the region's society, culture, and economics. Currently, she writes in the Pratidin Sunday supplement regularly as well as in Anandabazar. Srimati Anita Agnihotri, as an IS officer, spent a considerable time in Odisha and was fully dedicated for the upliftment of tribal and women in particular. Now, I would request Madam Srimati Anita Agnihotri to deliver her valuable speech on women and public administration.
উপস্থিত সকলকে আমার নমস্কার। রেসপেক্টেড মহারাজ সুপর্ণানন্দজি, শ্রী মৈত্র, ডক্টর নচিকেতা চট্টোপাধ্যায়, অ্যাসোসিয়েট প্রফেসর ISI কলকাতা, family and friends of Sonali Chakraborty, and members of the audience present here and also connected through the digital space. I express my gratitude to the Sonali Chakraborty Memorial Trust for having invited me to deliver the second memorial lecture in her honor. At the outset, I pay my tributes to Sonali, whom we lost untimely. She was a spirited administrator, an individual of great integrity, a frontline warrior who placed her commitment to public service parallelly with her personal duties and responsibilities. We lost her at a time when there was probably not enough clarity about management of the pandemic, and I clearly recall how far away in Mumbai we became aware of the criticality of measurement of oxygen saturation, among other things, after this tragedy happened. Sonali is always there with us, and at the same time, I deeply appreciate the idea of the Memorial Trust of preserving continuity of her thoughts and action through the series of annual lectures. The subject of the lecture, as indicated by the invitation from the Trust, is women and public administration. I will focus on this subject, but not confine to it entirely. I will weave my thoughts around the theme gender and governance and will attempt to formulate an alternative idea of governance which focuses on measurement of gender gap in development in order to make the world more equitable for women. The logic is clear from the series of academic writing on this subject, including that of Martha Nussbaum and other scholars. A woman is a biological entity defined by the child's sex at birth, as decided by the society and family, while a person's gender is a social construct which is conditioned by the society's norms and expectations and mostly defined by patriarchy. Martha Nussbaum has stated in her introduction to the volume of essays on the subject that being able to separate biology from cultural influences, which begin very early in a child's life, is a very important precondition for a sound research on the subject. There are dramatic cultural and societal differences, and the life of a female individual is shaped from birth by social expectations and norms regarding femaleness. These expectations not only shape the woman's life through a system of constraints and prohibitions, but also her self-perception about herself. Thus, the systematic shaping of female lives cannot be understood without referring to the conditions that shape the lives of men, their privileges and opportunities. In a similar way, the scope of governance is, in a sense, much wider than administration in the modern context. Understanding of governance was much narrower, even 3 decades back, and it was closer to the technical administration, mostly in the public sphere. Women's role were perceived to be confined to the private sector, that is, mostly in the domestic work and unremunerated work in the non-monetized sector. The interventions proposed in the public sphere mostly bypass them. Conditions of restrictions which the private sphere severely limit capacities of women to participate, and they have in any case to deal with a not so woman-friendly society, government, religious and political institutions. The important question that one can ask is, how gender sensitive is governance in India, and whether governance or the lack of it accentuates gender inequality. If we look at the completely iniquitous division of labor within a household in a typically patriarchal society in India, I speak of the typically patriarchal society because we have seen how the matrilineal societies in the Northeast treat and evaluate women. We can see that a woman is responsible from every activity, from rearing children, care of the elderly, cooking, procuring food and fuel wood, fetching water, going to the forest for collection of minor forest produce, going to market to sell the domestic produce, transplantation, farming, as well as wage work outside home, and as migrant labor to the far fields, in brick kilns, cotton, and sugarcane harvesting. Most of the roles have got assigned to women traditionally over generations, and so imperceptibly that they don't even realize that things could have been otherwise. All work at home is obviously unpaid, but work outside also is not properly evaluated. Women are often underpaid and payment is delayed. If in situations where women cannot bargain, This unequal division of work impacts on its turn women's health, well-being, and restricts a time for meaningful participation in the public space. There are several other discriminations within a family that restricts access of girl children and women to health care and nutrition, impairing their future quality of life. Now the question which arises here is, do our policies take note of these inequities and try to develop a just society with gender balance? Quality concerns in governance have become prominent in the last few decades, and the focus is essentially on human development. There is no doubt that the Indian Constitution, the directive principles of state policy, and the legal framework guarantee equal status for men and women. But the historical disadvantages imply that a lot of ground needs to be covered. To have a gender-sensitive governance, the first step that needs to be taken is assessment of the gender gap in development. And the most important instrument we need is a gendered database. Unfortunately, there is a serious need at this hour for disaggregated data at all levels and all milestones of life of a woman. Do we know, for example, the percentage of girl children suffering from severe or moderate malnutrition? We don't, because though disaggregated data is available at Anganwadi levels, it is not utilized. Very often, this gender blindness comes because we either do not feel that data has to be disaggregated, that is shown separately for men and women, or often we feel that it is not a labor, it is not a trouble worth taking. We all know about the declining sex ratio at birth for the girl children. Declining sex ratio means that the number of girl children vis-a-vis the number per 1,000 boys born, and this ratio has been declining since, I would say, post-independence, but before that, even 100 years back, since a century, it has been declining. We know about the declining sex ratio at birth for the girl children. It does not, it does not indicate very good future for the girl child, even at the time of birth. But we do not have area-specific, caste and income class-specific disaggregation. Do we know the number of women migrating with or without children? The answer is no. I remember last year when the pandemic struck and the lockdown was declared without much time at hand. Thousands of our migrant labor who were stuck at different points for need of work, they could not stay there because they could not stay in the houses because they didn't have wages. All transports were withdrawn, so they had slowly to come back to their own places in sheer fear of saving their lives and to be with their dear ones. That is the time it struck us that there is indeed a central law for migrant laborers. There is a ministry which looks after them. But even then, government did not have any information, at least the information could not be shared with the parliament at a later point of time, that how many migrant workers are stuck in which state. This information is very important. We are talking about a basic reality where we don't know the number of migrant workers stuck at different places in the country. You can imagine that if there were migrant women who might have gone with their children, small children or relatively bigger children, because often children help in brick kilns and other work along with the parents. What a tragic situation is that even their number and consequently their conditions were not known. If we don't have location-specific data for the migrant women, and we may not be able to respond to their specific needs, like nutrition, supplementary food, immunization, and smaller working day. It needs to be pointed out here that men are often not better off than counterparts in a poorer economic condition and an exploitative situation. It is just that women have different needs because of their biological conditions, and in a situation of low bargaining ability, the state is responsible for identifying their specific needs. Gender segregated data is available at source for many indicators. It is just that we consider it troublesome, as I said earlier, to collect and use it. Over the past 3 years, we are witnessing decisions, and decisions again spring from the sphere of public administration and policy, which are bringing more and more people into severe poverty. A sudden decision to demonetize high-value currency has dealt a severe blow to women in the unorganized business. The prolonged lockdown has led to unemployment of both men and women, but has burdened women more than their share of managing the household in terms of money and work time. Very recently, immediately after demonetization and before the lockdown, I was traveling in distant areas of Koraput and Kalahandi of Odisha, which I do often just to relate myself to the situation, economic and social in the country. I find that many women self-help groups, they collect grass for making brooms from the riverbed. They make brooms and they sell in the market. The entire transaction is done in terms of cash because the wholesalers come from neighboring states and buy up the material. With demonetization, the entire business came to a standstill, and lakhs worth of brooms were stuck in the godowns of the self-help groups. Now, this is a very serious situation which has happened because of a particular policy prescription, but there is no mechanism available with us. I am talking about senior civil servants like us or civil servants working, administrators working at the block and district level to quantify or evaluate the miseries it brought upon women. Why I am mentioning women? Because a mother's income, a mother's well-being directly influences the well-being of the children, their nutritional status, her ability to procure food, and also her ability to send the children to school in many cases. Migration of men as well as women and prolonged closure of schools have deprived the children psychologically and taken them behind milestones of educational achievement. In most families, taking care of the children's unlearning experiences and depression on account of being separated from the school environment have become responsibility of the mother or women at home. In West Bengal also, we have seen how children in the rural areas or poorer children in the urban areas who had essentially depended upon paying for the mobile internet in order to continue with the studies, they ultimately could not pay, many of them, they could not afford, and they got dissociated from studies. A recent study has identified, similar studies have been taken up all over the country, but the West Bengal studies have shown very serious unlearning has happened among such small children. Now, in a routine situation where we do not have the wherewithal to teach all the children properly, children who have suffered unlearning, we have to manage that gap and take them forward. At home, when this happens, when the mother sees this, her anxiety and her inability to cope with the situation adds greater psychological burden on her. We are at a juncture now, having realized that our understanding of governance is getting more specialized and I would say more sophisticated. We have to shift the focus of discussions on gender and governance to the study of measurable indicators. I am citing from the research of Dr. S.B. Agnihotri, who has been working on disaggregated sex ratios and girl-child survival for the last 3 decades. His work has identified the quantitative indicators for measuring gender imbalance. The shift in thinking will allow policymakers to engender the practice of governance and could strengthen further the qualitative concerns on gender inequality raised in different forums. In this way, I must mention that in getting gender in the forefront of policy making, government is as much responsible as are the different streams of women's activism and movement which are happening at all levels in the country. In his re-examination of inequality, Amartya Sen has shown that the space of outcomes is a more appropriate space for examining inequalities rather than the space of commodities or entitlements. These outcomes could be social, economic, or political, and it is possible to identify suitable indicators in these to find out how a group, women in our case, fares compared to the larger group or general population. The process of governance has an impact on all these outcomes that together define the well-being of its citizen. The process of judging the well-being of women needs unpacking of different components of well-being. One can begin with a very basic outcome, survival. This can be followed by the quality of survival, whether the life is short, nasty, and brutish, or free of this. Then comes the question of the skills of social reproduction one is able to acquire and utilize. Is one able to educate oneself? Is the productive use of a skill impaired? Is a skill remunerated equitably? Is one able to participate in the social sphere? It is the participation equitable? Where does one stand in the power structure in respect of such participation? It is necessary and useful to ask how men and women fare in respect of these outcomes. How does their longevity compare? Are they equally well nourished? Are their skill attainments comparable? Is there a disparity in their wages? How are they represented in different domains of public life? Here we are trying to unravel or unpack different areas of well-being in a woman's life and try to see how she fares well vis-a-vis men. If the social processes were equitable, the distribution of men and women in terms of most of these parameters would be similar. But that is an ideal situation and that is not there in reality. In reality, social processes are not equitable and this reflects in different aspects of well-being. Span of life, its quality, access to resources and the like. If we draw at random a sample of men and women and study any of the above characteristics, we will find men and women are clustered separately, revealing a gender gap in respect of that characteristic. These gender gaps can also be sample specific. Gender is not the only identity a person has. There are many others. Religion, region, caste or class, to mention a few. Among these groups, the gender gaps revealed by different indicators of well-being may vary significantly. For example, if you today track the level of education of a woman in an urban society and that of a tribal woman in a remote area, there will be considerable variance. That is because when you talk about women or you talk about gender, it is not a homogeneous something that we're addressing. There are stratifications of class, caste, religion, and there is a disadvantages associated with every kind of desegregation that we are attempting. Gender gap in nutrition may differ by region, sex ratios may differ by class, gap in educational levels may differ by religion. We need therefore two separate levels at which such data are disaggregated. One for different aspects of well-being, and among this, the other for different relevant groups to which men and women belong. Here, one need not concern oneself with gender equity in the apparatus of governance in a numerical sense. Yes, what we are trying to develop are numerical indicators, no doubt, But the whole process is not numerical or mathematical. The much larger issue is the sensitivity to gender equity in the entire process of governance, which affects the life and well-being of its citizen. Finally, gender-based disaggregation of development indicators is necessary to distinguish between development and discrimination. A gender-blind governance may only focus on the overall indicator, for example, under 5 mortality rate. But if they do not separate the mortality of male children and female children, there will definitely be a bias in terms of policy. A society may have high levels of development and discrimination. There are certain wealthier societies within India where prosperity among the upper middle class or the rich is remarkable, but there is also a great discrimination against the women. So it is not that we want a situation like that. We want a situation where society has to strive for high levels of development, at the same time combining it with low levels of discrimination. That is the ideal situation. Best is not to have any discrimination at all, but till we achieve that, this is the best situation. Now let us consider the different aspects of well-being. We are not going to get into semantics of definitions. We know that what are the accepted indicators that we are presently using. Now, each of these indicators need to be scrutinized for gender equity. To begin with, there is no harm in assuming that whatever is good for men is good for women as well. The fine-tuning can follow later. Let us look at survival. Mortality rates is a good indicator for survival in general. All other things being equal, lower mortality would usually correspond to higher development. But if we want to study the differential aspects of existence between men and women, we have to look at under 5 mortality rates of each of the categories, that is men and women. We should look at infant mortality rate, we should look at stillbirth rates, maternal mortality rate, and sex ratio at birth. Above indicators assume importance in the Indian context because our sex ratios display high masculinity and increasing female deficit. This has been with us since a large number of decades. This deficit also happens because the excess female mortality under the age of 5. The female children are under the threat of sex-selective elimination at fetal stage, which is called feticide, which is specifically barred under sex-selective feticide is barred under our Central Act, PCPNDT Act, but it is happening and we are all aware of this. There is also infanticide at birth, knowing that a girl child has been born, eliminating the child at birth. Excess mortality in the neonatal stage and in the 1 to 4 years age group. And interestingly, all these factors are behavioral, they are not natural. It is not that women children are more prone to death or vulnerable and men are better. It is not that. It is just that our very strong male preferences do not, it constrains our attitude and even drives us into illegal actions when it comes to the future of the female child. Now, among those girls of ours who survive, what is the quality of survival? In fact, coming back to the previous point, I should mention that in my travel across the country, I have found that there are several regions of India, especially Marathwada region, the drought-prone Maharashtra, where many women migrate in order to work as sugarcane labor. There's a very high rate of sex-selective feticide, and there is a regular chain of activity involving some radiologists, some middlemen, the family of the women, and there have been cases. It makes me sad to tell you, there have been cases known to me where a woman has been given birth one after the other, and she is not spared till she gives birth to the male child. There have been women who have died at their 9th or 10th pregnancies because the pressure for bringing to earth a male child has been so severe. And we should not congratulate ourselves thinking that we are in the city of Calcutta and we are better off. Calcutta and even many metros have shown similar kind of declining sex ratio at birth for girl children, which is not a very happy situation for our country. But let us come to the women or the girl children who have somehow been born, escaping all conspiracies. Among those who survive, how do we measure that their quality of survival is good? We need to know their life expectancy at birth. We need to know what is the stage of immunization, their nutritional status, and age at marriage or first pregnancy. While the life expectancy at birth is a much analyzed and monitored indicator, the same cannot be said in respect of immunization and the nutritional status. The asymmetry in nutritional status is either considered to be obvious or not worth bothering about. Both are not conducive to effective policy intervention. Age of marriage, first pregnancy, has a bearing on the health status of the mother and incidence of low birth weight, which impairs the child from the day of birth. How serious this is, we all need to think about. Last month, in February, early February, I was traveling in the Satpura area of northern Maharashtra, where the Narmada submergence has taken place. This district of Maharashtra called Nandurbar is a distance of about 10 hours from Mumbai. It has alarmingly high levels of malnourishment among children. And the result, I know this because the team of IIT Mumbai is doing this study, field study there, and the reason essentially is very, very low age of marriage of the mother. And the tragedy is the Bhils. The Bhil tribals have been one of our oldest groups, communities in India. And practically they were the leaders, they were the rajas of this place. After the Narmada submergence, their life has been different. They have come away from the hills to the semi-urban areas, and they're living in rehabilitation, resettlement colonies. They are not even aware that changes in their lifestyle has brought in some changes which need to be addressed. It's a very, very difficult question because when a mother is young and when the mother gives birth to a child of low birth weight, the child's life is compromised from the very moment of birth. Interestingly, I read a report in the newspaper today that West Bengal is one of the countries where women get married at much lower age vis-a-vis the rest of the country. About 45% of women in Bengal, they are married at an age which is lower on average than the rest of the country. So this does not augur very well for whatever we think West Bengal's being progressive and being ahead of others. But there is a way out. There have been cases where prevention of early marriages is taking place. But even if a mother has got married at an early age, there is a mechanism to intervene from the time of her pregnancy till a few months of the child's life so that the deficiencies can be monitored and intervened. The next question is of skill acquisition. If a woman has to get ready for life, she needs certain skills. Now, for this, the most important level is literacy. To understand whether this aspect of her life is protected well by our policy interventions, we have to see that what is the ratio of dropout of women at primary level, completion of primary education, dropout at secondary level, completion of secondary and higher levels. At every level, there is a challenge which may force a child, in particular a girl child, to come back home. In fact, it is interesting information which has got registered in my brain till today, that 85% of the children who drop out before the class 9 all over India, 85% are scheduled caste and tribes. So this points to the finer aspects of intervention we need to make if we want children, both poorer children, boys and girls, to stay back and go ahead so that they can complete the school and they can go for some skill development in case they don't want to go for higher studies. It seems that women are usually allowed to engage in subsistence level income generation, but their ability to move to the surplus domain and exercise control over means of production, whether capital or land, gets severely restricted. This is something Martha Nussbaum had said 20 years back. It is not enough that the girl child is educated and she probably gets some skill or something. It is important that she actually comes out to the public space. She actually acquires a position of decision taking, and equally important is her ability to get control over resources, control over the land which she cultivates, property which she may inherit, which is legally allowed to inherit. Now, we have been all very happy about the proliferation of these self-help groups in Bengal, in Andhra Pradesh. We often speak very highly about the textile workers in Bangladesh. I have no doubt that all of this deserve to be congratulated. But you have to also see that the level of income to which the women are reduced year after year, the low profit generating, low income activities in which they are confined, that will not let them go beyond a particular level in terms of well-being, even if we take into account the leisure they are allowed to, or the kind of care they want to give to their children. Even then, workforce participation is very, very important for women. Now, when can women actually come to join the workforce? Incidentally, there has been a decline in women's participation in the workforce in the recent time. In the last 2 years, women's workforce participation in India has come down. We have to see here, in terms of indicator, workforce participation ratios, patterns of workforce participation, wage disparity, waged and unwaged work, workplace conditions, patterns of migration, and conditions of the women-headed households. There has been a feminization of poverty. It is very lyrically said by economists. The women-headed households are they have the highest levels of poverty in our country. So there is a need to look at them. And this issue of work being evaluated, we are not even talking about domestic work. We are talking about a situation where men and women are paid differently. Women may face differential working hours. Now, all these things determine whether they will be able to stay on in the workforce or they will go back home. The terrible conditions in which many women work, obviously it is much better when they work in their home fields. But once they go out and work in the fields of others or in the brick kilns on others' agricultural farms, the conditions go mostly unregulated. As we all saw, there is a labor machinery, but nobody actually keeps track of wages and the benefits they're getting. Now, Papanek's research is very significant in this respect. He has written extensively about the process of withdrawal of women from waged workforce and for the purpose of bringing them back to the family for protection of the status of the family. Such withdrawal, once it happens, in fact, it is a very interesting observation that as a family grows in prosperity, there is a tendency to bring back the women to the folds of the family. Such withdrawal makes it difficult for the women to go out and fetch work once again. And if prosperity of a household may affect the status of the female members adversely, then it is obvious that their contribution to this prosperity is not there. It is not recognized or evaluated. Control over resources, of course, sounds very, very remote as of now. In most states, the patta of agrarian land is not given jointly in the name of men and women. Even the household pattas are not given jointly. Efforts are on with more increasing digitization of the land. These initiatives are coming. Their land ownership, their property rights, and their controls over means of production. We have to suitably devise indicators to look at this so that we can measure their actual ability to control the situation in which they live. Participation in public sphere has been a very important point of debate. And here, what is important is that not only should women participate in the external sphere, they should also be able to take or make decisions. How do we measure this? It has been suggested by Professor Alaka Basu's research that we can think of a very preliminary indicator, sex ratio of voters, that is the sex ratio of women vis-a-vis sex ratio in the 18 plus population. This may be a very rough indicator as whether they're actually coming out to vote, though as we all know, their being able to vote may not indicate their journey to the last point. In this pandemic, we saw all over the country the number of percentage of women vaccinated, even that which is free and given by government, fell short of the number of percentage of men being vaccinated. Which basically means there are restrictions which do not allow them to go out of the domestic fold, even to get the very basic level of intervention in terms of health. So when we talk of the public sphere, we should not only think of the voting system or their ability to vote, we should also see how they're participating in other forums like self-help groups, their trade unions, and political parties. There has been a lot of concern about a very, very discriminatory aspect of women's life, that is violence against women. Women are subject to violence not only in their family sphere, it happens outside family, and there are cases where violence is actually state-sponsored. We have enough data, but unfortunately, this data, there are very few officers in the police system who have actually time to analyze this, and I'm telling you why. For example, the National Crime Record Bureau, they present up to district level data by which we can see what are the cases or how many cases have happened of rape and molestation, for example, abduction, dowry and marriage related violence, unnatural death cases below and above 20 years of age, cases of murder of women, there are cases of custody deaths and murders. But the issue is this: when I was in National Commission for Women and I traveled nearly the entire country, the brief span of time I was there, I could speak to the officers to the level of commissioners of police and director generals of police, and I asked them, are you looking at the specific cases of crimes against women and how are you planning to combat it? All of them said, except one exception, all of them said, we have no time. We are so tied up with VIP duties and law and order management that looking at crimes against women, we just don't have the time. You can imagine the consequences of this, because if these are not monitored, then quality of investigation suffers. If in a case of assault on a woman, the evidences are not collected on time, then the entire case falls in the court of law. What will the public prosecutor do if he is not trained or briefed and he fights with a very, very deficient level of investigative evidence? There is no doubt that most of our cases of attacks on women, the rate of conviction is the lowest, and 80% of the cases are pending in courts of law at any point of time. Only one police commissioner of Pune, IPS officer Meera Borvankar, said, she is the only lady police commissioner at that point of time, she said, yes, I monitor crimes against women separately, and these things are reviewed by me, and any officer being negligent about follow-up in these cases and investigation are strictly dealt with. So we are in a situation where there is an indifference of the system, not only because we do not have enough data, Even if we had data, how do we deal with it? And then after we get data, what kind of decisions are we taken when in a matter of mental attitude we feel that these things are not important enough to drive my attention to? To put it briefly, I'm coming to the close of my lecture. We are still away from a policy practice which measures gender gap at different levels of women's life and devises interventions so that equity in quality of life is maintained. Neither policies nor budgetary provisions are made that way. All of us know that all over the country, governments are spending more on direct benefit interventions. In West Bengal also, we have several schemes for women, from Lokhir Bhandar to basically Konyashri, and providing bicycles, giving bags and books for not only for girl children, all children in school. These are all one-way interventions. But the point is, this will work up to a point. But this will not work when we come to areas where women are deficient. I'm not talking entirely about West Bengal, where such deficient pockets may be less in number, but where women are more disadvantaged compared to men in terms of nutrition or health access or even access to schools. There we have to devise strategy, and having one kind of strategy which is based on one-time direct intervention may not work for all the time. But the kind of governance which looks at this, the fine-tuning that is needed, we are probably in a present democratic situation in India, we are not equipped to either face it or deal with it. The state has a major role to play in this along with the women's movement. Being born itself is a challenge for a woman. Growing up without her health and education being compromised is another challenge. Being educated and in work are very important, but ultimate goal is that the woman is in a position to control resources, comes out to public spaces, and occupies a decision-taking role. There are many ways in which women's survival can be incentivized. I'm sorry I'm using the word incentivized. Even if we do not have a gender-based indicator, government can say that there will be housing loan at much lower rate for girls, for women, working women. There will be houses made available at subsidized cost by government, just to see whether people's desire to have more male children, get balanced finally. Whether women are in a position, whether women's survival can be incentivized, and infrastructure for their work life can be built. We talk about the situation. I have heard these important discussions in Niti Aayog myself, that we want more women in the workforce. Because in that case, India will get to the goal of $1 trillion economy faster. But how do the women work? You look at the conditions of security. You look at the condition of restrooms, places where they can feed the child. Look at the condition of toilets the women have. If they come to work, you have to build adequate infrastructure which gives them enough security and enough comfort. When are we going to invest in this? And before that, let us not demand that we want more women to work. We have to also see that women-specific violence, I mentioned it already, women-specific violence is investigated and convictions done so that it can enable the woman to live a qualitatively better life, parallelly with trying to make gender justice measurable. Government does talk about gender justice, not that they don't talk, but there is a great unwillingness to make it a matter of practice. And it is very clear from the gender blind or gender insensitive way in which we collect large data, and the insensitivity with which, even if we have a data, we do not utilize it. So most researchers and development practitioners in this field feel that relentless monitoring of the indicators of gender gap is a must. Only then we can move finally towards an equitable society for women. Thank you.
So we just listened to Srimati Anita Agnihotri. She has made the air very heavy in our own minds. I was thinking of the very term she used, feminization of poverty, at each and every level. We all expected that she would be talking on the condition of women in accepting jobs in the public administration. Yes, he dealt with that concept at the fag end. Fault is not theirs. Fault is with us, menfolk. We have not given them enough opportunities. They need more complete infrastructure facilities. We know that. But the way she dealt with the role of public administration in ameliorating the conditions of women in general is astounding. Had Swamiji be present in this hall, he would have shed profusely tears from both his eyes. And we are on the verge of crying out in pain while listening to her analysis. I do not have really any word to thank her. She has made us think. And few mothers and sisters present here, I have no way to express their views, especially on the total picture that Srimati Agnihotri unveiled just now. The Vice Chancellor Sobhuj Kuli Sen, Didi, she is before us. Didi, would you have anything to say? No?
What she has said is very much true. In my experience, I have seen when I was working in Sriniketan area, in rural development, I have seen everything, and whatever she has said is absolutely.
So that we also feel. That we also feel.
I do not know what is the solution. Because we have.
Didi, do you want that men should come forward to protect them?
Mindset is
Would you still believe in their role?
No, Bharaji, what I have said essentially, I have tried to give an alternative way of looking at gender gap and countering it, but we cannot do it. It is not a question of men protecting women or women deserving mercy. The question is, when we formulate policy for which we take people's money, we should look at it in a way so that our interventions are gendered in the sense we can target the gap. Unless we do that, that is what I explained at each level of woman's life. Unless we do that, it cannot be handled emotionally. It needs solid data which is gendered data, and we also I have basically said what I said is very, very practical. that we have a government system, we have a public administration system, we have policy makers. You take data which is disaggregated, you formulate indicators. I think Dr. Chattopadhyay is the best person to understand this. And you prepare indicator for each level of woman's life, from pre-birth condition to birth, to survival, to education, to skill management, to public sphere, and finally control of property. Only if we have a fine-tuned working like this and not populistic measures which covers all women as a blanket measure and one-time measure, this problem cannot be solved. This is what I tried to say. I basically gave the ideas of research not only from eminent, legendary scientists like Martha Nussbaum, Dr. S.B. Agnihotri, my husband, who has worked for 30 years in this area. The indicators, today it seems like dream. And why should a government, instead of doing, say, Lakshmi Bhandar or Kanyasri, do something like this? Why should I go and see in Sundarbans how women are faring, how men are faring? Who has time? But we need to have, because all developed countries where women are doing the best today, in Norway, in Switzerland, in Europe, this is the norm. You have to look at the differential and measure the gap and intervene. That is what I was trying to say. Education also, but again a differential impact on education. A tribal girl who comes out of school at the age of 11 and comes back home. Have we addressed her requirement? We only give scholarship to children who go up further up. What about those who come down? In Bengali, Khoshe Para Tara, stars which, Khoshe Pore Jeshab Tara, who looks at them?
Where they go?
Where will that girl go? She will either get, go migrate work in somebody's field, or she will get abducted in the name of marriage. She will get killed someday. But we don't have time for them. Okay, even as Social Justice Secretary, I could not convince government on this, so there is a problem. But we are not alone. What I'm saying is, government and women's movement have a joint role in bringing up these issues. We have to go for a better quality of monitoring, which is possible only if we have information. If we don't have information, it is like looking for the needle under the light. If Anganwadi level, we know how many girls are malnourished and how many boys are malnourished. Girls' number will be far more because their access to nutrition is blocked by their parents. But if we can't talk to their mothers, even if we have the data, and the state secretary says, it's not important to distinguish girls and boys at this level. It is too minor a level. With that attitude, you may get development, you cannot get good quality of governance. That is what I was trying to say. I'm sorry, sir, I keep you waiting so long, standing so long.
It is all okay, sister. The problem is that should we have to depend on chances? That's it. Because even in the enlightened families, having say, education and also, I should say, affluence, those families all over India, they also discriminate against women folk. Why? Education is not the answer. Then we have to depend on what? Fate. We go on explaining it, discussing it. I know you have a very beautiful heart to feel for them, and you have been transmuted these feelings to all of us. For that, we are all thankful to you. Acha, would you come? You want to propose a vote of thanks?
No, what I'm saying is, basically you have to make it, the policies have to be made depending upon that particular level of life, particular, pocket to which the woman is belonging. There has to be separate policies for, let us say, if a Dalit woman or a marginalized category woman, the policies have to be, that's what I'm talking about fine tuning, which is not happening today, but I cannot say that it will not happen today, happen any day. Sorry, you had a question?
Segregate or desegregate the gender issue. What I'm saying is that at your state of profound service in Orissa and Bengal, the neighboring state of Jharkhand, there are several mica mines where the girl and the boy child, their children are walking together. And there are cases of deaths occurring from the mine slides. And how this case covers to the fact that the government is getting the actual fact and that is not worked upon, acted upon. Because the intervention of many NGOs, non-profit organizations and internal agencies happen over there and for the betterment and the upliftment of the lives of the girls. Basically what the mica is being transported to far off international executive companies and they are making foundation out of that and basically the girl child is working for the beauty of the girl, woman healthcare products or the foundation, the beauty products. So how do you follow up?
No, I cannot get into specifics here, but your point is very important. That is why I mentioned the migrant labor's case. We have a completely dysfunctional monitoring by the labor department, and I would say government is very complicit in letting this happen. It is not only mica mines, there are brick kilns, there are mining, quarrying in even our own state. Jharkhand, there are cases where people are doing mining of stone. So all this is there and it needs a separate, specific discussion, which I cannot do at this point. But
Because the focus of the death rates and the ending points are much more higher because of the toxicity of the mine.
yes, there are dangerous conditions in which children or no human being should work, but it is happening. And you must be knowing that when pandemic was on, the country was under lockdown. What Dr. Ambedkar did for the workers, that was extended up to 12-hour working day, surreptitiously by not having any discussion. At least 6 state governments brought out that change in the labor laws without consulting anybody. So this is a very, very serious issue, and right now I cannot deal with it because that is not how I get into specifics. Please excuse me for that.
Thank you. Acha, I invite Mr. Maniklal Mitra to propose a vote of thanks. Before that, I want to clear one misunderstanding between Didi and myself about the name of Nachiketa. Nachiketa, I told that Nachiketa Chakraborty, and you said Nachiketa Chattopadhyay. Yes.
Nachiketa Chattopadhyay is the correct statement.
No, it is not correct. It may be correct for you, but it is not correct to him. He has changed his title in favor of his wives. That you don't, but this is a great change. He has a great mind. Against the custom, mind that. So you could have been Chatterjee also, but now you are Agnihotri. But he wants to change his name, title, surname. Thank you.
Obviously, that will be most appropriate for this kind of discussion. Husband changes his title in favor of our wife.
Sorry, I'm just taking a minute just to add.
Yes, in my case, the government of Bihar unilaterally, without consulting me, changed my name because there is a Bengali gentleman, Gauri Shankar Mukhopadhyay, who was the personal secretary. Women used to apply for a name change, it would not happen. So they used to be blamed by their in-laws that you have got married and your surname is not changing. So he thought he was doing me a great favor by unilaterally changing my name from Chattopadhyay to Agnihotri. And how do I blame him? It is basically a patriarchal bliss, I can say.
So you have become also a victim.
Victim, yeah.
Yes.
But no regrets.
Something in favor of this point. One of my relatives, normally in Hindu family, what happens after the death of the husband, the wife just eat vegetable or something like that. They don't eat meat or fish or some kind of that. So one of my relatives, he is actually the male person. His wife was dead. So after the death of his wife, he actually hasn't taken any kind of fish, meat, etc.
What about Nachiketa?
The reverse-
Follow. There is an end to it. Okay.
End to it.
Conclude, sir.
Thank you. Now it is time for giving vote of thanks. And I have been permitted by Maharaj. I am honored to be given the privilege of addressing the vote of thanks on behalf of the Sonali Chakraborty Foundation and, of course, Dr. Nachiketa Chakraborty. And I must thank Srimati Anita Agnihotri for her willing and quite frankly, because I was following her continuously on behalf of our foundation, and quite frankly, compelling readiness to deliver the second Sonali Chakraborty Memorial Lecture on Women and Public Administration, as well as for allowing the foundation to publish a booklet containing the lecture. Her lecture on the subject will certainly help us to explore new areas like data analysis for women empowerment and policy making. I must thank the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture, Golpark, and Shami Suparnanandaji Maharaj for this fruitful collaboration and being a fountain of constant motivation to all of us, encouraging us in our endeavor to reach the destination of public good and make our existence a little more empathetic and meaningful. I also convey on behalf of our SCF my gratitude to Shami Atmopriyananda ji Maharaj for the book which today we have inaugurated, and Sri Swaraj Majumdar for translating the book. I heard that it was made in a very fastest manner, and Sri Shondip Chatterjee for printing the same. The book is available free of cost for the guests till the stock lasts, so you can collect the book. The last but not the least, I must thank the guests for giving their valuable time, supporting presence, and the question hour session. Hereby, with the permission, we formally announce the closure of today's ceremony with the high hopes and still resolve for a beautiful new beginning so that we may achieve our goals. Thanks again.